The gentle May sunlight filtered through the white lace curtains into the spacious kitchen. Emily Parker was pouring pancake batter into the pan when she glanced out the window. In the lush green garden, her 8-year-old daughter Lily was already playing energetically in the early morning. "Lily, pancakes are ready." At Emily's call, her daughter came running into the house, her black hair bouncing. Lily hugged her mother, her large blue eyes sparkling. "Yay! I love Mom's pancakes. Go wash your hands." Lily nodded happily as she passed Michael, her father, who was coming down the stairs. Emily sighed inwardly as she placed the maple syrup on the table, taking in this peaceful Sunday morning scene. Even though it was the weekend, Michael was dressed in a suit. It wasn't unusual for her husband, a successful investment advisor, to work on weekends. "Working today too?" "Yes, we've got a major deal coming in," Michael answered, sipping his coffee elegantly. "But it looks promising." 3 months ago, Michael had been promoted to an executive position at a major investment firm. With the promotion, they had just purchased a new home in an upscale neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. Even with Emily's salary as a pharmaceutical researcher, maintaining this house wasn't easy. Still, Michael took pride in providing the best life for his family. "I'll always give you both the best life possible." As Emily watched her husband leave after saying those words, she felt something wasn't quite right. She couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. "Mom, are we going to Grandma's house today?" Lily's voice brought Emily back to reality. "That's right." Sundays were for visiting Michael's mother, Margaret. The matriarch of the Parker family was known as a distinguished art collector. With her neatly styled silver-streaked short hair and always elegant appearance, she adored her granddaughter Lily. "Yes, we are. Grandma's probably waiting for us." When Emily answered, Lily jumped with joy. Margaret's mansion was a large colonial-style building from the 1920s. The interior, filled with art pieces, was like a small museum. Emily still remembered feeling overwhelmed when she first visited this house. "Oh, Lily. You look lovely today." Margaret smiled, gently patting her granddaughter's head. Her gesture exuded the refinement characteristic of the upper class. But lately, something had been off about her mother-in-law. She had been falling ill more frequently and making more trips to the doctor. "Margaret, how are you feeling?" "Oh, well, about what you'd expect at my age." Though her mother-in-law brushed it off lightly, her voice carried a hint of fatigue. Since then, Emily and Lily had taken to helping with her care every weekend. Michael rarely visited, citing work as his excuse. One morning, Emily's phone rang. It was the Connecticut State Police. Margaret had passed away. The housekeeper had found her collapsed at home. Emily hurriedly woke her daughter and drove desperately through the wet streets. When they arrived at Margaret's mansion, several police vehicles were already parked outside. Police officers with black umbrellas were moving back and forth in the rain. "It appears to be natural death due to heart failure." The medical examiner announced this, but everyone present seemed somehow unconvinced. In particular, Mary, the housekeeper who had served Margaret for over 20 years, stared at Emily with eyes that clearly seemed to be trying to convey something. Looking back later, perhaps Mary had already sensed something then. She kept trying to explain to the police that Margaret hadn't answered their usual morning phone call that day. Madam always woke up at 7 without fail. For her not to answer the phone. Mary's trembling voice reached no one. Michael dismissed it, saying, "It's normal for elderly people to have irregular schedules." Michael didn't shed a single tear. It was her time. He said this matter-of-factly and immediately began contacting insurance companies and funeral homes. His efficiency was as if he had been prepared for this. The funeral was held on Sunday. Black-clad figures streamed into St. Mary's Church's white building. Many of Greenwich's notable figures attended, reflecting the breadth of Margaret's social circle. Even the usually vibrant social elite wore expressions of deep sorrow that day. Tears glistened in the eyes of friends who had long worked together in charitable activities. The trustees of the Bruce Museum, country club members, and those who had joined her in philanthropic work. People in black attire spoke one after another about their memories of Margaret. Throughout the service, Lily held tightly to her mother's hand. Her eyes, holding back tears, were the same blue as her grandmother's. The rain continued throughout the funeral. A week later, still carrying hearts heavy with grief, Emily and Lily visited Margaret's house to sort through her belongings. Standing at the entrance, Emily felt her chest tighten anew at the absence of the usual warm welcome. The cloudy sky made their melancholy mood even heavier. Michael was supposed to join them, but he had said, "An urgent meeting came up. I'll head back first." And left early. The mansion had already lost its vitality. A dusty atmosphere lingered, and even the art pieces seemed to have lost their luster. "Mom, let's start with Grandma's bedroom." Emily nodded at Lily's suggestion. The master bedroom on the second floor was a space filled with Margaret's life. Antique furniture, faded photo frames, and carefully preserved letters. As dusk approached, the room gradually darkened. Margaret's belongings cast a melancholic glow. A silver brush sat on the dresser. A French antique lamp beside the bed. And the numerous portraits hanging on the walls. They all quietly told the story of her late mother-in-law's elegant life. Every time Emily touched these items, she felt as if she were touching fragments of Margaret's life. Yet simultaneously, everything in this room seemed to assert the unnaturalness of her sudden death. Margaret had been a meticulous person. The room was always perfectly organized. But only the bedside table drawer was slightly left open. In the silence-dominated space, the two continued their work quietly. "Mom, look. Grandma's phone." What Lily pulled out from the bedside table drawer was Margaret's old smartphone. "Yes, that's right," Emily answered without paying much attention. But the next moment, "Grandma told me, if anything happens, look in this phone. I've hidden an important treasure there." Emily's hands froze at Lily's words. When did she say that?" "Last Sunday." The last time we came to Grandma's house. Emily's heart began to race. Had Margaret sensed something? Or... She took the smartphone with trembling hands. The screen displayed a request for a passcode. Emily instinctively entered Lily's birthday numbers. The screen unlocked. There was a notification showing one unread message. The sender was Michael. Emily's finger hesitated. Finally, she opened the message. Just one line. But the weight of those words was enough to freeze Emily's entire body. Keep quiet. You're next. The blood drained from her face. Her mind went blank. A chill ran down her spine. Mom, what's wrong? You look pale. Her daughter's voice sounded distant. Before Emily's eyes, the illusion of the happy family she had built up seemed to come crashing down. That night, the gray building of the Greenwich police station was shrouded in deep darkness. Emily sat in the cold chair of the interview room, holding a sleepy Lily. The fluorescent lights cast an artificial glow on the anxious expressions of mother and daughter. When was this message received? Detective Sarah Morrison, a middle-aged woman, carefully questioned Emily. Her eyes held both the warmth of a mother and the sharpness of a veteran detective. The morning my mother-in-law passed away. Emily's voice trembled. Since discovering Michael's message, her mind had been blank. She had instinctively grabbed her daughter's hand and run to this place. Take it slow, and tell me everything in order. Detective Morrison gently but surely drew out Emily's testimony. The changes in Margaret's health, Michael's unnatural behavior, and housekeeper Mary's testimony. The fragmentary information began to form a pattern. Late into the night, Lily fell asleep on a sofa in the adjoining room. As Emily watched her daughter's sleeping face, she felt overwhelmed by anxiety about their future life. Just then, she heard a noise from the investigation room. "Mrs. Parker, please come here." Detective Morrison's voice had an urgent tone. In the laboratory space surrounded by white walls, forensic experts were intently studying Margaret's blood test results displayed on a large monitor. Multiple chemical substance waveforms drew irregular patterns. They showed traces of drugs that couldn't be detected in a normal autopsy. Particularly noteworthy was the presence of a specific synthetic substance. This wave pattern, in my 20 years of experience, I've never seen such sophisticated manipulation. The veteran lab technician muttered, furrowing his brow. His profile showed a mix of professional anger and contempt for the perpetrator. As a pharmaceutical researcher, Emily understood all too well what this meant. It's an extremely precisely refined poison. An optimal choice for making it look like natural death. Senior examiner Dr. Gray continued his explanation with a frown. His voice was tinged with professional anger. The investigation progressed rapidly. Margaret's bank records were examined in detail, revealing suspicious movements of funds by Michael. The IT investigation team thoroughly analyzed the security camera system at Margaret's mansion. It had recorded numerous suspicious activities by Michael. He had been entering and leaving Margaret's house multiple times around the estimated time of death. Particularly noteworthy was the footage from early morning on the day of the incident. 5:30 a.m., entered through the back door. 6:45 a.m., exited through the front entrance. During that time, he appears to have been doing something in the study for about an hour. A young investigator read out the timeline. His voice was filled with tension. The security cameras had also captured the moment when Michael put something small in his inner pocket as he left the study. That would likely prove to be important evidence. Past midnight, new information arrived at the investigation headquarters. The security cameras at Margaret's mansion hadn't just captured Michael. A woman's figure had also been recorded multiple times. A surveillance camera footage analysis expert was trying to identify her using a high-performance facial recognition system. And finally, decisive evidence was found. "Mrs. Parker, do you know this woman?" The photo Detective Morrison presented showed a young, beautiful blonde woman. Rebecca Wilson, the investment firm's secretary. Michael's mistress opened up during questioning. "I can't keep hiding it anymore." In the heavy atmosphere of the interrogation room, Rebecca's confession was shocking. Though she was dressed in an expensive brand-name suit, her usual elegance had already disappeared. Her makeup was smeared, and her carefully styled blonde hair was disheveled. "I'll tell you everything. I can't lie anymore." The confession she began with a trembling voice was beyond imagination. Her 3-year affair with Michael. The plan to target Margaret's enormous inheritance. And the perfect murder plan using drugs. Everything came to light. "But why did you rush to execute it?" At Emily's question, Rebecca made a bitter expression. "Because my pregnancy was discovered," Rebecca continued with a bitter expression. Michael completely panicked. "According to his plan, we were supposed to wait another 6 months." She heaved a deep sigh and revealed an even more shocking fact. "Mrs. Margaret had noticed our relationship. And last week, she had met with a lawyer. Michael accidentally found out that she had begun preparing to change her will." At those words, the air in the interrogation room froze. The detectives exchanged glances, seemingly realizing the gravity of the situation. At those words, Emily gasped. The change in the will. It meant that Margaret had already known everything. That's why she left that message through Lily. The clock in the investigation room pointed to midnight. Outside the window, it had started raining again. However, this time, the sound seemed like hope to Emily. As if they were waking up from a long nightmare now that the truth had come to light. Detective Morrison spoke quietly but firmly. "We're going to execute the arrest warrant now. We will absolutely protect you and your daughter's safety." Emily nodded silently. Her vision blurred with tears. However, these weren't tears of fear or sadness, but rather tears of purification, as if finally being released from all burdens. In the next room, Lily was sleeping peacefully. Outside the window, the sound of rain served as her lullaby as she dreamed innocent dreams. Emily made a firm vow. From now on, she must become strong to protect this child. Margaret's final message had given her that courage. The next morning, multiple police vehicles quietly gathered in Greenwich's upscale residential area, still shrouded in fog. Unmarked patrol cars were strategically positioned along the maple-lined street. The leaves, wet with morning dew, swayed in the slight breeze. Detective Sarah Morrison was conducting final briefings in the command vehicle. In her 20-year career, she had rarely needed such meticulous preparation for an arrest. The target was an intellectual criminal. Moreover, one deeply rooted in high society. There was no room for error. The target may be armed. There's also a high risk of flight. Exercise extreme caution. Team members nodded silently. Just then, the porch light at the Parker house suddenly came on. A figure could be seen from inside. Michael, disguised for an early morning jog, came out wearing expensive athletic wear. As if knowing nothing, he began elegant stretches. Michael Parker. Detective Morrison's voice cut through the silence. You're under arrest for murder. Michael's expression froze instantly. His pupils trembled beneath his perfectly groomed eyebrows. However, as expected of an investment professional, he quickly composed himself and put on a gentle smile. Isn't this some kind of mistake? There must be an explanation for this. That composed expression didn't crumble until the moment the handcuffs were put on. Years of experience supported him even in such an extreme situation. His expression management, attitude, and voice tone were all calculated. Reporters had already begun gathering in front of the Parker house. Camera flashes glowed ominously in the morning mist. The morning in the upscale residential area began with a sensational arrest. In the interrogation room, Michael appeared with his lawyer after being allowed to change into an expensive suit. He looked like a businessman about to enter an important negotiation. I deny everything, he stated matter-of-factly, his voice still carrying arrogance. Adjusting the collar of his expensive suit, Michael looked around the room. His attitude was as if he were in some boardroom. I have a solid alibi. Also, such a forceful arrest significantly damages my social credibility. I will seek appropriate compensation. Just as his lawyer began spreading out documents, Detective Morrison quietly placed a photograph on the table. It was part of the contents found in the safe in Margaret's study. At that moment, Michael's expression slightly tensed. What Detective Morrison presented was the contents of the safe discovered in Margaret's study. It contained decisive evidence of Michael and Rebecca's relationship. Secretly taken photos of their meetings. Records of fraudulent fund transfers. And most shocking was the diary Margaret herself had left behind. My son. Your plans were all seen through. The diary, which began in a confessional tone, detailed how Margaret had already known everything. Michael's affair, his debts, and even his murderous intent. She had realized her death was approaching. Why? Michael's voice trembled for the first time. How did you know? To that question, Detective Morrison quietly answered. Mrs. Margaret was wise until the very end. Your unnatural behavior, sudden movements of funds, and above all, The detective paused for a breath before continuing. She said she understood everything when she learned of Rebecca's pregnancy. At that moment, Michael's mask completely crumbled. His face turned pale, and he covered it with both hands. The shoulders of his expensive suit trembled minutely. Outside the interrogation room, Emily held her daughter while watching this scene. Through the one-way mirror, she silently observed her husband's collapse. "Shall we talk about the truth, Michael?" Detective Morrison's voice was quiet yet filled with authority. Her eyes held the confidence that comes from years of investigative experience. On the desk lay a case file about 10 centimeters thick. Inside were numerous records meticulously tracking Michael's life. Let's go back 10 years. To when you met Emily. The party at Boston Graduate School. The gleam in your eyes when you learned she was doing pharmaceutical research. Do you remember it all? The blood drained from Michael's face instantly. How did this detective know this information that no one was supposed to know? The air in the interrogation room suddenly grew heavy. The truth revealed from there was more cruel than anyone had imagined. Michael's plan had begun from the moment of marriage. He had chosen Emily precisely because she was a pharmaceutical researcher. For his perfect plan to target Margaret's fortune, he had spent 10 years meticulously preparing everything. But something unexpected happened. The detective continued. Rebecca's pregnancy. And Mrs. Margaret's unexpected moves. You panicked and drastically moved up your plan. That was your fatal mistake. The clock in the interrogation room struck noon. Michael finally began to tell everything. Emily listened to his confession to the very end. The tears had stopped flowing. Instead, a strong determination had sprouted in her heart. For the truth her mother-in-law had left behind, and for the new life about to begin. Early summer, 1 year later. Reporters had gathered again at the imposing Greenwich District Court building. It was the day of the verdict. Behind the heavy doors, Michael Parker's fate was about to be decided. The courtroom was filled with tense air. The wall-to-wall wooden panels emphasized the solemnity of the occasion. Emily held Lily's hand as she quietly waited for the judge's words. The defendant, Michael Parker, is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. Michael's expression remained unchanged until the end. However, the prison-issued clothes he wore instead of his once familiar expensive suits symbolically told the story of his downfall. His accomplice, Rebecca Wilson, received a 20-year prison sentence. Until the end, she maintained that she had merely been deceived by love. However, the evidence clearly showed her active participation. So it's finally over. As they left the courthouse, Emily looked up at the sky. 1 year since Margaret's case. Her and Lily's lives had changed dramatically. They had left Greenwich and moved to a quiet residential area in the suburbs. The new house was purchased with part of Margaret's inheritance. Though not spacious, it provided enough room for mother and daughter. "Mom, I love my new school." Lily had adapted well to the environment. The initial concerns about emotional trauma had gradually healed through professional counseling and her mother's devoted love. While continuing her research at the pharmaceutical company, Emily had also begun a new project carrying on Margaret's wishes. It was the realization of her late mother-in-law's grand dream. Margaret Parker Memorial Art Museum. The sign of the museum, converted from the old mansion, gleamed in the summer sunlight. It had been transformed into a public space to showcase the art collection Margaret had spent her lifetime gathering. Many local dignitaries attended the opening ceremony. Those who had been close to Margaret were genuinely delighted to see her wishes so beautifully realized. Grandma's dream came true, didn't it? Hope shone in Lily's eyes as she held her mother's hand in the exhibition room. Emily paused in front of Margaret's life-sized portrait. Her mother-in-law's elegant smile seemed to still watch over them. Meanwhile, Michael and Rebecca had begun their lives in prison. According to reports from lawyers who visited during visiting hours, Michael spent his days silently reading books in his cell. Rebecca gave birth 3 months into her sentence. The child was adopted by another family. Life really is unpredictable, isn't it? Emily whispered quietly while watching the sunset streaming through the museum windows. Margaret's final gift had been more than just property. It had taught her the courage to begin a new life and the strength to protect those she loved. Come on, Lily. It's time to go home. Mother and daughter held hands as they left the museum in the twilight. On their way home, Lily pointed at the sky. Mom, look. A double rainbow. A beautiful rainbow arched across the rain-cleared sky. It cast brilliant colors, as if blessing the beginning of their new life. Emily vowed to keep moving forward. After all, the truth and love Margaret had left behind would live forever in their hearts.